Right. Is it on record? There things go on you that you'd be surprised.
Your perspective of how the world is just a mad place. Blow your face out.
Bro, it's mad out there. Yo, wait, get the group shot.
I see man them, yeah.
What is up, people? Welcome back to the Shape Up. This is our 2024 year roundup. We got a lot to cover, so I don't want to waste too much time on the intro. But we're kind of today going to go through how 2024 has been mucked. So we've had everything from Trump's bulletproof campaign down to certain man talking about hiding Bibles. So God ain't watching if they catch a hook in that. And also down to Diddy's 1,000 bottles of baby oil and lube. So we've got a lot to get through. So just introducing everybody, bring everybody back for this Shape Up edition. Let everybody go out. So we got Trife.
Yo.
We got R Dubs.
It's good, people.
We got Millionaire Mike.
Bonsoir, mesdames et messieurs.
And we got Mr. Blake.
Good evening.
We're there. So 2024, as I said, has been a mad one. Actually, it was really interesting looking over 2024 because I don't know, low-key, I didn't feel like that much actually happened. But when I started digging deep, I was like, yo, a lot has gone down this year. So I'm going to go like chronologically, just hit through the months and kind of tap base with everything that's been moving. So I'm going to kick things off with January. So January, a lot went down. So first of all, I'm going to it's got a bit of preamble to this, but this was really interesting. So Harvard University elected their first Black president, Dr. Claudia Gray. And she was the first Black president, the second female president. And she was also, unfortunately, was the shortest serving president of Harvard University. Now, why was it the shortest? Well, Claudia, she was on the end of a campaign to kind of, and I'm really keen to get Mr. Blake's views on this, but she was apparently on the end of what's the best way to put it? An anti-wokeism campaign. And this don called Christopher Rufo basically went after her. So he is like, it blew my mind how vocal he was about what he was doing to take this girl down. He said, and I'm quoting him, in order to get her out of this position that she was in, to get her to resign, this was really a team effort that involved 3 primary points of leverage. First was the narrative leverage. This was done by myself. Second was the financial leverage, which was led by Bill Ackerman, who is a billionaire Harvard alumni who donates to the university. And finally, the political leverage was led by Congresswoman Elisa Stefanik, and she put in a masterful performance at Gay's hearing. When you put these elements together, squeeze, you see the results that we have today, which ended in the resignation of America's most powerful academic leader. So, like, to go deep into this, there's so much in this. This is like a really complicated story, and I'm only going to skim the surface here when we talk. But to cut a long story short, Claudia Gray was a lady who was, as I said, the first Black president of this university and the second female. She basically got after by this don Christopher Rufo, who first of all said that she plagiarized all of her publications, basically. When I look through the evidence is that she didn't really plagiarize. She kind of was a bit lazy with the way that she accredited people's work, yeah, which happens in academic work, which is what lots of people are saying. The other thing is, at this time when she was doing this, at this time when this all started coming out, in America, there was this whole big thing about anti-Semitism. University campuses was boiling over. There was like protest on site, Free Palestine, all of that stuff. So what the government did is they pulled 3 ladies. When I'm reading the literature, it's interesting. They took 3 girls, yeah, from different who were presidents of three universities, big universities in the States, and they were just recently elected. Yeah. And they pulled them in to say, look, what can we do about all this anti-Semitism? But really, if you watch the videos, it was a trap. As soon as they got into the room, they started hammering them. Like the Congress girl said to the woman, well, let me find it, I'll quote. She goes, did calling for genocide for Jews violate Harvard's rules on bullying and harassment? And in the interview, it's really uncomfortable watching it. She basically just tries to say, look, we're trying to promote free speech, and it depends on the context of which this was said. Now, it's really interesting because, you know, basically after she had the pressure from basically, first of all, being told she was plagiarizing, to then being grilled basically for the nation to see and being made to feel really awkward. The third thing that happened is this billionaire who donates to Harvard started a public campaign on X, basically saying, how can we accept these people who plagiarize? How can we have all these DEI people coming in? Why is she a diversity pick? She's not qualified. Basically, racism doesn't exist. You know, people should only be elected who are qualified. He basically went in on her, but he used plagiarism as the major factor. And then he started saying, if you don't do something, I'm going to pull all my sponsorship, all the money I pour into Harvard University. One other caveat, I've been rambling on for a bit, just to give some background, is his wife is also the president of MIT, I think it is. And she was found to be plagiarizing. And his words for her were, we're human. The good thing about her is she's human and she apologizes. So for his wife, it was like, and when I say the evidence says that when she plagiarized, she actually lifted full paragraphs from Wikipedia for her PhD, for her thesis.
Mm-hmm.
He said, oh, you know, she's a human. She apologizes. She accepts it. For Claudia Gray, it was like basically lynching. So after all that preamble, sorry, it was a long one. It's really interesting. I want to talk to Mr. Blake, because I know Mr. Blake here is our DEI guy. So I want to ask you some questions basically on what you think of this. So one of the things that, well, basically, first of all, tell me what you think, bro, before I even get into deeper the questions. What's your thoughts on this case? I don't know if you've heard about it.
I've heard snippets of it, but I think the way you just put it all together was nice. When I'm hearing all of this, there's a couple things that spring to mind. So the first one is they'll do anything to discredit someone in a position like that if it's not on board with what they're trying to push and what they're trying to promote. We saw this with Diane Abbott. Was it last year? We had that big conversation.
This year.
It was this year. And it's a similar thing. Big Tory funder, one, disrespect the woman and discredit her. We're seeing the same here. And I think it's quite pertinent that you said, you know, his wife had plagiarized as well. And it's that old adage, isn't it? One rule for them, one rule for us. Now, as you lot know, I work in a D&I position. And what I'm seeing in the D&I sphere is, in America, a lot of corporate companies, they want to scrap D&I. And as with anything with America, when America has a cold and it sneezes, the UK gets it as well. And we're starting to see that shift happen with D&I over here, where companies are saying, boy, we're going to have to X our D&I positions. It doesn't help when you've got certain members of the government or the Tory government who are trying to push for D&I roles to be taken away. Essentially, what I'm seeing from all of this, there's a big thing that all these people are missing. Has everyone heard of CSR?
Yeah.
Corporate social responsibility. D&I is a massive part of that. So essentially, if you're trying to take away D&I in one aspect, you're just shooting yourself in the foot, because what we're seeing now is everybody's on this whole CSR thing, and diversity inclusion is a big part of CSR. So if you can't see that mix there, which I feel people can't see in those kind of positions, then boy, they're going to find out the hard way.
Yeah. Yeah, very, 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 very true. It's interesting because I think before I sent you I think it was a podcast. I don't know if you had a chance to listen to it, but
there was bits of it. There's bits of it, and I think what I'd say to this is this: having worked in that for a little while now, you gotta realize that essentially you're trying to change people's mindsets, yeah. And essentially, when you're seeing certain issues of a DNI nature pop up in work, it's a reflection that it's a microcosm of society. Whatever's happening in society is going to play out in there, yeah. Now, the thing is, when it comes to this whole DNI journey, we're all on different levels. And I think sometimes we've got to give and take. I've got to meet you there, you got to meet me there. But as long as there's constructive and respectful dialogue, this is the most important thing, because when you haven't got those two facets in place, that's when it all breaks loose. And it goes back to what you were saying, Doc, about, the freedom of speech. Now, I've spoken to my mum and a couple of elders about, racism, DNI and everything like that. And a lot of people say to me, do you know what? I preferred when the racism was more overt as opposed to how it is now, because at least you knew how you stood.
You know where you stand.
And I think I think that's one of the things with DNI that some people argue that it mask up thing and might allow you to become a better racist.
Teach people how to navigate, yeah.
And that's something that I'm coming across more and more and more. But look, the stats don't lie. When companies are more diverse, they're more likely to be more creative, more productive, yeah, and you're going to have diversity of thought. But more importantly, when it comes to tenders, there is always a big DNI question. And if your company's DNI record is not to scratch, you're not going to get the business. Yeah. So essentially, corporates got to work out the balance of, are we doing it or are we not doing it? But best believe, if you're not doing it, you're going to do it in another way, whether it's through CSR or the loss of business when things are getting put out.
But wouldn't you feel a way though, like if you're like a black person and there was like, say, another, like, for example, Caucasian person going for the mix for the same job, but because they needed, I don't know, say you both were on like level terms, but you only got the job because you were a certain shade darker, would you feel away a little bit if you knew that?
There's the thing, Trav. Like you got two things. You got positive discrimination and
I was going to bring that to them.
Positive action. And I think it's how companies go down that thing, down that path, innit? But here's the thing, innit? Obviously, every company's got to protect themselves in a certain way, so they're always going to do it in a way which is conducive to them at the end of the day. But I hear you, because at the end of the day, and I know if RW was on here, he'd say the same thing to me in the sense of you want to ensure that you get the best person for the job, regardless of their color, creed, religion, and so forth. But we know it doesn't always work like that. Yeah, it doesn't always work like that.
Yeah.
I mean, Doc, there's a couple of things that I drew from your story, or from the story which you shared with us, which was rather interesting. Now, to begin with, I'm not entirely familiar with the story, but there's two things to me that stood out effectively. Is that I think I want to touch on two things. One is white supremacy, and secondly, it's the there's an issue with people of color that are essentially intellectual, that are challenging the intellectual elite, but somewhat through white supremacy. White supremacy is trying its very best to retain, if you like, in that custody of intellect, and that elitism, which I think an establishment like Harvard University probably will always want to be represented by a person of a Caucasian heritage. And to me, this is a perfect example of racism, because racism and prejudice are two different things. You can dislike black people, as an emotive measure, as an emotion, if you like. But if you are able to dislike black people by displacing them, or by making their lives more miserable, or by essentially changing the course of their destiny through your means, whether these means are academic in this instance or financial, as you mentioned, there's some heavy financial backers in this instance, then to me that's a clear example of what race prejudice can lead to racism. And in this instance, this lady clearly is a victim of modern day racism, because whilst she was capable, intellectual, and brilliant, in terms of what she's achieved, she's far better than the average person, let alone the average black person. Despite her brilliance and despite her high achievements, she was not able to fulfill a full term, or a term that we would consider to be satisfactory in her position, because, she may have decided to discuss particular subjects or challenge particular subject. And as you said, she was trapped into essentially a false sense of security, where despite her position, she was able to essentially be alienated from it. And it is sad to see, but 2024, still resembles 1904, 1804, 904. When the fate of Africans and Europeans were intertwined, and since that fateful relationship, if you like, or that fateful meet, the person of African descent continues to be, less worse off, if you like, in the face of white supremacy and sort of white democratic structure, if you like, and that to me is what I could deduce from that story.
Do you know what I've found is this story? I feel like is a story that we should teach our kids, because I recommend all of you guys look at the literature and the videos that are out there and just look over this case, because it kind of puts a spotlight on society and the things that I talk to my kids about. I don't know what you guys do, but I try to really introduce concepts to my boys to get them to understand. It really shows it. The guy who pushes the whole thing and kicks it off is so out in the open about what he's doing. It just blew my mind. I was like, he's clearly said, this is how you remove somebody from a position of power. You give them a create narrative, financial leverage, and just push them out. And one of the things I would really recommend watching is the video where she's interviewed in Congress. It's awful. They set her up proper, good and proper. And to go into that environment thinking you're trying to work towards making your university campus a safe and healthy place for everybody, to walking into this room where some girl's ready to hit you with these questions, and you're trying to remain integral and say universities should be a place of free speech where people can think independently and have open views, and we can't try to control people's minds or create right or even left-wing views. They should be able to formulate their own mindsets. And to see the way that they really went after her in court, I think is lessons we can learn. And kind of as I'm rambling into that, I guess this is the question I was going to throw out to probably you, Millionaire Mike. Looking at the case, I know you don't know that much about it from what I went through. What can we take from it as a community? I think often when people of our color get into positions of power, I find that society, people, and sometimes I even think us, we're guilty of trying to find how did they get there? What's wrong with them? What's wrong with their come up, and try to sweep them. How can we support people in positions of leadership so that our younger kids can see these people of leadership and aspire to be in those places?
I think you touched on some very poignant points, said Doc, and I think you might have answered the question without realizing. But you said that the individual in question was able to displace her by creating a narrative and by having financial power. Now, one of the most important things that we need to have as a community, and again, the Black community isn't a monolith community, but there needs to be a mechanism somehow, where people of African descent or of the diaspora, or people that consider themselves having African roots, can be able to tap into, whether it's a financial resource, whether it's a private equity fund of sorts, or a businessman, if you like, that has an anthropological penchant for supporting people of the diaspora and African descent into achieving, great things, not just for the community, but for humanity as a whole. And I think that's really where, unfortunately for this lady in question, she did not have the support to counter that level of aggression, which she was made a victim of. I think it's also important to understand that whilst you could be academically brilliant and achieve high positions, as an individual of African descent, do you then need to consider potentially compromising, a degree of integrity to toe the line, if you like, in order to retain your position of power? So again, this takes me back to this sort of house Negro, slave Negro type of mindset, where the house Negro benefited from all the comforts of the master. And in this instance, while she was able to, achieve everything, pretty much on her own, it was her own intellect, her own endeavor, all the hard work that got her to where she got to, it wasn't enough. Dr. Vassell. It wasn't enough. And what saddens me about this case is the fact that an individual can be as honest as it can be, intellectually honest, because we found that yes, she was accused of plagiarism, but really and truly, she wasn't accused of plagiarism. Perhaps she didn't reference her sources properly. Perhaps she may have omitted one or two references. Meanwhile, we have a lady of Caucasian heritage who lifts paragraphs from a Wikipedia page. I mean, how lazy is that? How blatant is that? And yet she's excused. Yet she's pardoned. And that is because, like I mentioned earlier, the intellectual custody seems to only reside with one group of people, and this lady could not have been able to achieve the grade or the doctor's title that she achieved, by being honest. She would have had to cheat. So then again, we go back to this sociological issue and prejudice of the black being the deviant, the black being the less trustworthy, the black being unable to lead effectively, and it's a big concern, Doc, because as you know me, I'm an optimistic individual, but in the face of that, I think about the micro level. I think not necessarily the elitists in this instance, but the everyday people like ourselves, who were brave enough and honest enough to pursue a straight journey, who were susceptible to, the charm and to the, the glitter that the roads and the ends can actually bring to young, impressionable black men, and black women for that matter. And, we are doing our very best to show them the way, to show that there's an opportunity out here that requires you to, focus on your endeavor, trust your hard work and your intellect, but yet there is a ceiling for us. There's a plateau that you will reach, and if they want to take you out, Doc, they will, as you clearly illustrated in the story. So it's a difficult one, but I'll go back to what I said earlier: economic power and having the opportunity to also dictate a narrative. That to me are the main 2 points that we should take from this story.
But Mike, let me ask you something. Do you still have that same stance for Kemi, the leader of the Tory party? Do you see a parallel, or do you see a similar sort of plight here?
Very good question, Mr. Blake. With Kemi, I think it's an interesting one.
Can I pause you on that one? Because we're going to come to Kemi. It happened this year.
Right. Okay.
Because this has been such a good topic of moving forward. We're going to come to Kemi a bit later. But I just wanted to say, I implore all of our viewers just to read up on this story, because it is really, really interesting. There's a lot to be learned from community and as an individual from the story. So moving on to February, getting a bit more lighthearted. So obviously we're UK dons, but apparently in the States, the Super Bowl is huge. It's huge. And this year it broke records, 123.4 million viewers. Now, what I found interesting was our don Kanye West. So Kanye West reportedly spent about 5.5 million on a 30-second slot. And I don't know if you guys seen his advert, but his advert was basically recorded on his phone, and it was low budget. And he basically says, I spent all the money on just getting this slot. So here it is. Go to Yeezy.com, and that's it. Now, if you watch it, I don't know if you guys have seen it, but it's funny, and it just makes me think, like, I'm not trying to get cancelled, so I'm not saying anything this Donna says I support. But I wanted to say to you, Trife, do you think this guy's a genius and just misunderstood? Because I
think he knows what he's doing. He's been around the block, if you can imagine, because where he started, he was just like low level. Then he kind of blew up really quickly, and then his downfall was really quickly as well. So I think he's mastered the audience. I think he's just mastered America basically on how to manipulate the system, and I think he just showed that with that advert basically. He spent, what you say, 5.5 million or something like that on the advert.
£5 million, like $7 million on 30
he also made, what was it, like 20 odd million in sales.
Easy,
just straight off based on one advert. And obviously not everyone's Kanye West is not everyone's cup of tea, but he's got really like loyal supporters, and so he knows his his audience, and so he kind of just caters to it, kind of thing. So yeah, to answer your question, he is a pro genius. I reckon he knows what he's doing. He blatantly knows what he's doing.
That's my feeling. So, Million Mike, what can we learn from this Don? What good can we take out of all of his madness?
I can tell you what he's mastered. There's a concept in marketing called the ADA model. Attention, interest, desire, action. ADA, yeah? And if you're able, as a marketeer or as an organization providing a product or service, and if you can provide those four things or do those four things extremely well, then it will translate in sales. And I think what Kanye West has essentially done extremely well, he understood the model. Whether he understands the theory behind it is a different matter. But I think what's interesting about Kanye, he understands human behavior, human psychology. And as Tribe said, he understands the American public really well. And he's been able to capitalize from that. And I think for any aspiring business person, it's also interesting to understand that you need to have a marketing budget and you need to understand when to spend the majority of it. The Super Bowl, as you said, Doc, is one of the most watched televised event in the world, possibly after the World Cup and the Olympics. I mean, I myself, I'm wearing a New York Jets jersey, having the pleasure to see them, on a live game a few weeks ago. And so I've become also accustomed to this American pop sports culture, let alone the whole world has been captivated by it. And I think Kanye West is an absolute marketing genius. And we've got to give credit where credit is due. And again, I'd like to touch on the brilliance of, Black intellectual minds in this instance. And kudos to Kanye West.
Yeah. Definitely.
So then also something he did in this is he had these weird kind of slipper like shoes. And I think when he did it, he sold them for, I'm just going to pull a number out of the sky, but it was basically imagine that this was 4 times the value. I think you say he sold them for £150.
Yeah.
And they basically, I think they sold out like immediately. And then when he released them, he added more stock and dropped the price so that it was something like £20 and refunded everybody. So there's only a limited number for the people who bought it first. Once he dropped the stock, dropped more stock, dropped the price, he refunded all the people that paid like the £150. Yeah. And then loads of people paid like the £20 for this thing. And it probably cost him about £1 to make. So I wanted to say, Mr. Blake, as with regard to breaking that down on a human psychology level, because it sold out again. Like I'm sure he made more money that he made with the investment of £1 for these little boot sock things than charging the £150 for it. In looking at human psychology, what do you think he's done there, and how has he managed to pull off that?
So I wanted to caveat what you just said there, because was this done in the light of when he made certain comments about a certain demographic?
That was after that.
It was after that. Okay. I think it goes back to what Mike is saying, isn't it? He knows his audience. He knows they're fickle. They're like wrestling fans. They're like football fans. They're fickle. You know what I mean? He can do little stunts like that and people are enamored by it and they're going to go out and buy the product. So kudos to him. But I will say something quite flippant. I do wonder, is man on his medication? And I say that respectfully. Because, every now and then we see the mad little outbursts and gets reined in, and then he just produces something where you're just like, oh my God, he's a genius, as you know, all alluding to. But I think he just knows his audience.
I think he's seen things, and because his mum was a Black Panther, wasn't she? And so he's got that kind of realism to himself, and then he had like the fake living with obviously the Kardashians and stuff like that, and so he had almost like two worlds clashing, and so and obviously the grief from his mother dying and stuff like that. I just think that made him turn mad as well. So but
he's never forgiven himself for that.
I think he holds that quite firm. So
Doc, there's one thing I'd like to touch on what Kanye has just done from a business point of view that possibly viewers may have missed, is in the initial sell pitch that Kanye West did when he was able to amass such amount of cash as a business. This is what you could do during that period. Is let's just say your balance sheet, your cash reserves are showing 100 million. You can go to the bank and you can increase your credit line on the basis that you can show cash reserve of 100 mil. Yeah. So at that moment, for that particular period, I reckon, and I almost would willing to bet my dog's life on it, that he went to the bank, probably said, look how much paper I'm making. I want to increase my credit line by 20-30%. The bank will look at it,
Jeez.
look at it and say, you know what, that's fantastic. And whilst he gets an additional credit line increase, he can definitely refund the people that are buying it for $20 or so, because that again, you've got to give this man props. He understands the rules of the game. And for those people out there, this is what you do.
Got to learn
Banks
from
will only loan to you, give to you if they can see that you've got collateral, you've got the paper there in the bank to show that you can make those monthly repayments. Kanye easily has done that, because remember, prior to that, he was dropped by Adidas for his
Yes.
madness. So
Yeah.
you can actually see how the guy was able to recuperate. Because if you remember the articles thereafter, Doc, right? There were articles saying that he was broke, and then
Yeah.
suddenly goes back up to $1 billion. Yeah. How
Yeah.
do you think he's done that? That was the move right there.
He's
That's the move right there.
he ain't got $1 billion still back. He's not back to that cash level. Yeah. He probably got it's probably about 350, and then probably gone up to about 500. But again,
Possibly, yeah.
he's not owned by anyone in it. So
Yeah, exactly. He's created his full own brand, and I think that's kind of where I wanted to go from. That is again learning from, because we can take good sides from everything, really, there's bad sides and good sides, but learning from him. And I'm really glad, I'm really happy for that insightful point that you dropped, Millionaire Mike, on it. But yeah, there's a lot to learn from his moves and the positive chess moves that he made. Because when I saw what he did, I was like, yo, this guy, he's moving right. He's moving right in certain things. So next thing, Trife, where are you from? Or like your heritage roots?
half Nigerian, half West Indian.
Half West Indian. And Millionaire Mike, like roots.
Both parents are from Ghana.
From Ghana, okay. So I'm gonna single you out for this question then, yeah. So don't hate me. So in February, Ghana said a big fat no to LGBTQ plus. They said it's a prison sentence for you for 3 years minimum if you try to come out with any of them pronouns or anything. Yeah. I wanted to ask you, because you're coming from Ghanaian heritage, because you understand the culture probably a lot better than I ever will. What are your thoughts? What do you think?
I wasn't entirely surprised by this move, to be honest with you, because for primarily Ghana is a Christian fundamentalist country, similar to Jamaica and other parts of the Caribbean, where unlike the West, where religion's dying and possibly people are not caring as much, in the continent of Africa, and especially places like Ghana, where there is a strong Christian and Islamic influence, and as well as African ancestry worship and all that kind of stuff. There is a big emphasis on family, the traditional family, and by that sense, I mean the nuclear family composing of father and mother, potentially creating children. So this alternative, I don't want to say lifestyle, but the sexual orientation and the sexual persuasion that essentially is being bestowed upon the African continent, especially the countries of Ghana. Many Africans and Ghanaians in particular felt that it was another potential Western colonial philosophy, if you like, that was, at odds with what the everyday person of Ghana or the everyday Ghanaian considered to be acceptable. So, you got to understand that, the Ghanaian government is a reflection of the people, being because it's a republic and it's democratically elected. And all they were doing effectively were voicing the opinions of the 30 million odd Ghanaians, of which I'm sure a small percentage of them are of the LGBTQ persuasion. However, they were outnumbered by a vast majority of Ghanaians that follow either Quranic or biblical principles, which makes it very clear that the only acceptable union before God is that of a man and a woman, and everything else isn't considered to be, let alone lawful or even holy or even scriptural. So it's not much of a surprise, As far as my thoughts when they are concerned, I respect the people of Ghana. I respect their decision. I'm not going to lie and say to you that my parents did not instill similar values in me. But given that I've had the opportunity to be Western educated, I'll also appreciate that human beings are free to make their own choices, are free to express themselves. But in this instance, the people spoke and the country spoke, and we have to respect it.
Yeah, this is very, very, very interesting, Mr. Blake. So on this topic, thinking about it, there's this concept someone kind of introduced me to at uni that kind of made me laugh, and it's the concept of as long as it's not in your backyard, you don't tend to really care about it. And I think in like politics, when we look at a lot of politics, you have the left wing that are really extreme on their views and the right wing that are really extreme on their views. And the problem is, I think the majority of people generally actually are in the middle. But people in the middle aren't passionate about anything and don't really shout about that much. So we never really get across. So going on to this whole what basically Ghana have elected, do you think this is a problem with the majority not hearing the minority or the extreme views?
Great question. I think it all depends where you are on the political spectrum at the end of the day, innit? You know what I mean? And I just think of that whole Malcolm X quote, innit, of saying those that are oppressed and the media make you look at like you're to be the oppressors. And, you know, one could argue, well, are some of these countries not progressive like the Western world? But it goes back to what Mike was saying, innit? If they've got certain fundamental core religious values that they're backing, who are we then to kind of just say, well, nah, you should, you know, get that? And I think this is the problem that we have when it comes to LGBT plus Q issues, in the sense of, if you say you're against that, for example, like they did in Ghana, you're then homophobic, and it's just like, well, hold up a second, I'm not homophobic, I just don't agree with it. And I think we haven't found that balance, because when you're quick to say someone's homophobic, you're saying that you there's an inherent fear or hate, and I don't think that is the case. And that's what I'm saying. I think everything's still a bit blurred when it comes to issues of diversity and inclusion, and I think this is why we keep coming back to the same sort of conversations, because, as I said, when it comes to D&I, everyone is at different levels of the journey. Some are here, some are there, as you said, some are in the middle. And I think we don't meet each other where everyone is at. We expect it to be that or that, never in the middle.
Yeah, I think the word that you just said, we use, I think, is a great word when you break it down. When you think of the term homophobic, it's like a medicalization, because phobia in medicine, we call phobia like an rational fear of something that will not cause you harm. And when you think about even using the term, it brings you to an extreme kind of viewpoint. When everybody says transphobia or homophobic, it's like you have to be in this extreme view, whereas you know, everybody's entitled to their views, which I think is very important. I think language is such a beautiful and dangerous thing all at the same time in these situations, if I'm really honest with you. So P, go on.
I've got one more point I'd like to make. So in light of our government, you know, currently led by Keir Starmer, you know, tackling immigration. Now, do you think it would be more welcoming of the people of Calais if they were all LGBTQ plus individuals escaping the persecution of their countries? So let's just say Ghana is one of many countries across the world where these LGBTQ plus laws are being exercised, where prison sentencing or severe reprimands could actually be bestowed upon the individual engaging in such practices. Now, do you think that there would be a different view, it will be as welcoming to these individuals if they all were of that community? You know, if it's such a problem, you know, for those countries in Africa, Ghana in particular, to want to conduct their business and their affairs in a way that they see fit for their country, then fine. Ghana can arrange for those multiple individuals to be deported into the UK or any other European nation or Western nation that would welcome them and that would allow them to live in a country where they can exercise those rights. I still don't think that the general people of would be accepting them anyway.
I think the government would, but
people,
your
that's what I'm
normal
saying, and they're elected by the people.
The normal Johns and stuff, the people that are starting the riots will be like,
there you go.
But the language would have to be manipulated and changed, because they obviously can't say that. So it would be some other way they'd package it to give it to people to say, hey, this is, you know, it's in my backyard, so we can't really be doing that.
But Mike makes a great point though, and I think this is the thing. I think with a lot of people that have tried to come into England, they've come on false narratives, and that is one of the false narratives that they've come for, which therefore makes it difficult when you have got genuine cases of people that are being persecuted for their sexuality and so forth.
Yeah.
So again, where do we get that balance? And I think we're far from getting that balance.
Yeah. So it's a crazy one. So let's move on to March, because we spent a long time at the beginning of the year. So in March, a lot happened. So again, for our community, Vaughan Gething, I'm hoping I'm not butchering his name, and his first name's Vaughan anyway. He was the first elected black leader of a national government. He's originally from Zambia. And again, this Don only managed to last 118 days before he gave in his resignation. And it looks like basically some of the things that surfaced is apparently he received £200,000 worth of donations from a firm that was under criminal investigation. Yeah. And the thing is when you look into it, it's not like criminal investigation, like they were racketeering. I'm not saying it's good, but I think it was like environmental issues this company was under. He had to defend himself. And before you knew it, he was like, hey, again, I bow down, I resign. So it's only the beginning. We're already in the third month of the year, and we've got another kind of similar case of black people reaching a position of power, and then they're down. So I want to say Tribe. So in this sense, like, do we need to be bulletproof in order to get to these positions and stay in these positions?
That's what I was going to say. From obviously the cases you've brought forward, and just from loads of different cases like through the years, it looks like you need to be squeaky clean. Like you can't have anything, have said anything on Twitter, have any links to anything, have any beliefs. You just got to be vanilla, like just straight through the middle, basically. Because it looks like they dig out anything really. Like you see that, for example, you go to showbiz and stuff like that. Like, what was it, Kevin? Oh, what's his name again? Not Kevin. Yeah, Kevin Hart. He was supposed to do one of the top award shows, and then someone comes out with some jokes he made.
Something he said on Twitter like time ago,
and obviously he was dropped from the position. So you need to be in the position, man, or be doing something to someone far on top to be able to stay there, really. So yeah, to answer your question, it looks like you literally have to be squeaky clean or have someone to delete your record from before or something, man. Yeah.
So Mr. Blake, on this then, do you think we are, and I probably already know your answer to this, but it's interesting to get your view. Do you think then we are playing on a level playing field when it comes to what the standards are expected of other races as opposed to us? And therefore, is that the reason why we can almost turn a blind eye to positive discrimination?
Great question. Well, yeah, as you said, my answer to the question. So I think, no, we're not on a level playing field. Never have, never will be, unfortunately. Until we are spiritually connected as a community, we're going to continue to have these issues happening and happening and happening and happening. Yeah. Unfortunately, it doesn't matter how low you are, how high you are in your position, as people of color, or even as black people or black men, as the four of us are on this call. Gotta check your rear mirror, your wing mirrors, and your back and your front mirror, and it creates an inherent sort of fear that at some point someone's just gonna pull the carpet under my feet. You know what I mean? And you can't live in that state of fear constantly, because you're just constantly burning out your adrenal glands. Do you know what I mean? But unfortunately, it is a way of life for us, and that's why it's that I can understand. And from what I'm seeing from my experience and other people's experience, I see why people are now wanting to sort of do it on their own in terms of set up their own businesses, because they just don't want to get caught up in the politics of licking that glass ceiling. And when you get there and you're there not trying to knock it down, you're just shutting it back down, because as everyone's saying, they'll find something to get you on.
Yeah, totally.
Really good. Yeah. So
I'd like to make a point, Doc.
Yeah, of course. Go ahead, man.
The point I was trying to make, the reason why I was laughing is like, this nigga could have been Jesus.
Yeah.
And they would still got rid of him. And they would have still got rid of him. Like, they crucified Jesus, an innocent man who did nothing to no one, and yet my man's laid on a cross, and we thank him for it. But the point that I'm trying to make, and again, I'm an optimistic person by nature, but I'm also a realist. And to echo what Mr. Blake said, is that there is nothing that you can do as an individual. You could be absolutely squeaky clean, never had a case, never been absolutely amazing, help old ladies cross the street, be great at what you do. But at the end of the day, you know, your melanin will make you guilty.
You're
That's
still
just how it is.
yeah. You're still
Yeah.
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 Look at young Philly. Look at young Philly.
Yeah.
So, talking about guilty, I'm not saying he is, but P. Diddy. So in
Mm.
March, stuff started to unravel with this Don, and he got his yard searched, apparently because he allegedly is involved in sex trafficking and sexual assault. I'm beginning to feel, and I'm not defending this Don at all, because some
Yeah.
things don't add up. Yeah.
Yeah.
But what I will say is, again, we're just in March, and I'm seeing a lot of people getting got. So I wanted to say to Trav, I think Trav knows the music biz a lot better than I do. What are your feelings on this? Is man just getting got, or is there no smoke without fire?
I think it's a combination of two things, really. I think it's P. Diddy has been prominent on the scene since about 94, 92. So from everything I've heard, he's done a lot of dirt, and so eventually things are gonna catch up with you. And I think, do you know, like when you get to a level and you just think you're untouchable, I think that happened to P. Diddy. And maybe when he first started out, he was a bit more careful with what he was doing, and but he was just
careless.
Exactly that, doing things in camera running out, whatever he did to Cassie. Don't condone that, but come on, like, you're in public kind of thing. And so I just think it was just his karma catching up with him. But again, there's been a lot of other people that have done similar things, like with the parties and stuff like that, and then nothing's happened to them. So again, he's that wrong shade of melanin. So as millionaires Mike said before, but again, it's just how big the case was. Like, you couldn't go on the internet for like a month. I remember that month, March to April, without hearing anything about Diddy. So yeah, so again, it's two different things, definitely.
Mr.
But
Blake,
you
I
know
see you.
what? Yeah, but you know what? You missed. There's a fundamental thing that you've missed, and I feel it's something we've discussed in the group, in the sense of,
Yeah,
we have said, and a lot of people said, he upset his masters by trying to take a certain brand to court.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
we're seeing that narrative of, when you step out of a place as a melanated man, they're gonna come on you like thunder. You know what I mean?
Get got, hands behind your head.
And I thought it was quite interesting that we ain't mentioned Mr. Cat Williams, and he said this was going to be the year of the exposure. And it's quite interesting how a lot of the people them in Hollywood, like the celebrities, they're trying to move out the country, or, as you said, trying to clean up certain things.
Yeah.
Because the storm is,
Clear the
the
browser
storm is
history
coming.
and that.
Yeah, the storm is coming. The storm is coming.
Yeah, so that was, as you said, big thing. He tried to take on Diagio, and I think if he didn't do that, none of this stuff would have come up. Because they've probably got private investigators, and they just got like money to do whatever. And
when you got money, you got more money, you can just throw money at the problem and it goes away.
Yeah,
100%. So interesting. In April, Trump showed us that apparently, if you're a president, actually, no, I'm rushing ahead a bit. So Trump became the first president in history to be under prosecution, or ex-president, for his hush money trial. And I just wanted to kind of think, because we've already been talking about a few people in positions of power who were had perhaps maybe too high melanin content. So I wanted to ask Millionaire Mike, do you think that our newly elected president in the States, if that was a black Don, like let's say Barack Obama, and he did the same, he would have been afforded the same luxuries?
Yeah, I mean, full disclosure, I kind of like Trump, man. I think he's cool. I really do. He's a bit of my guilty pleasure, if I'm brutally honest. But objectively speaking, if Trump was in P Diddy's position, he would have done considerably better than what P Diddy is actually going through.
Mm.
So I think that as far as Donald Trump is concerned, I had an idea. I looked at the case, vaguely. I personally don't see what the big deal is. If he's engaging in sexual intercourse with a next porn star, known prostitute, and he didn't want it to come out, every man is entitled to having some indiscretions. Everyone, once in a while. And if he didn't want it to come out, then giving the lady some money to tell her to not speak of what they were involved with, I don't see anything wrong with it.
I really don't see nothing wrong with that at all. I don't really get
Yeah.
that.
So, on that point, sorry to cut you, Mike, but as Trive said, I was hoping it would go this way. Do you feel like there's a narrative to try and what's the word I'm looking for? Slander Trump, and there's like a big push to make it be something that he's not.
100%. I think what happened in the Capitol, I think it was at the wake of the second election where Trump was potentially likely to stay on for another 4 years. I think they realized how influential Trump was, but more importantly, his supporters were willing to do whatever it took to ensure that he retained power. So to some degree, he's revered as a messianic figure for many Americans, and it wasn't a surprise given the recent elections that he won by a landslide. And to be honest with you, we all knew he was going to win because his popularity was so vast, and he was able to do many things that very few presidents were able to do. I think he was able to capture the alternative media in the sense that he was one of the very first, if you like, Twitter or ex-presidents where he was able to engage in social media. Even his political campaign was really interesting. Him going on Joe Rogan and all these other podcasts to essentially convey his message. I thought was actually excellent. So I do think that there is a bit of a campaign against Trump. I think that campaign is probably supported by people from his very own party. Probably don't see him as a suitable candidate or let alone a suitable leader because the Republicans are traditionally what we would consider to be the conservatives in this country. They would be the equivalent, and Trump is nothing but conservative.
Yeah. Can I just pick up on the point about you said about I think with Trump in America, I think there's two sides to it. So there's the ones that I think it's really half and half, So I think that you've got the people that love him and you've got the people that hate him, and it's really half and half. And I think the only reason he won that election was because Americans don't want to see a female president more than a black president. Because you go back to Hillary Clinton, she was against Trump, and then Trump had all them allegations about grabbing by the beat, yeah. And he said he still won. He still won.
I know that blew my mind.
Exactly that. And he lost to like Joe Biden, like just any bumbling whatever he is, man. So my point is that it's because I think people just didn't want to see a female in the office. That's my point of view, rather than it was more Trump, if that makes sense, that people wanted to see Trump in the White House, because I know quite a few Americans, and there's either hate him or you love him. There's no in between. That's definitely half and half.
We're going to come back to him. We're going to come back to him because he did a lot this year. So I'm going to, in the spirit of keeping things moving, I'm going to talk about something controversial that we did here in the UK. So in April, we decided what would be a good idea is if you get on a boat here, we'll put you on a plane and send you to Rwanda. So I wanted to ask Mr. Blake, actually, is that a deterrent? Do we have a problem, and is that a suitable deterrent?
Well, you just got to look what happened in Liverpool, in Merseyside over the summer.
We're going to come to that.
That was the sentiment of a lot of people. There's a lot of people that were thinking up north, not even just up north, across the whole of the country. So if they're acting and moving like that, that tells me straight away there's a big problem there.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting that. So we're going to come back to this because a lot did happen from that. But in May, we're going to move on to May now. I'm going to ask I'm going to ask Terry because I reckon you know. I'm going to ask Millie and Mike. So, lyric that kind of blew up and kicked off our love obsession with a good amount of beef. Trying to strike a chord like A minor. Millie and Mike, who's that artist?
That would have been Kendrick Lamar.
So Kendrick Lamar went number one and literally tore up the scene. And again, over May, you just couldn't go anywhere without hearing about this beef between Kendrick Lamar and Drake. And he dropped that track, Not Like Us, which had, to this right now, has about 121 million streams alone on SoundCloud. He's released a new album recently, actually, as well, which is actually quite lit too. So we love a good beef. I'm going to come to Tribe. What is in this beef between these two dons? What happened between Drake and Kendrick? Do you know?
I think it's been going on since about 2013, man. To be fair, I remember Kendrick. I know Big Sean dropped this song, and you had like all that the youngers on there back there. J. Cole, obviously Big Sean. I think who else is on it? I can't remember. But basically, Kendrick just went mad on it. His verse was mad, just saying he's the best. He don't care about. He respects them, but he don't care. He wants to be the best, and whatever it takes. And then they took obviously subtle little jabs at each other, and then this year it just blew up, man. I think Future and Metro Boomin dropped an album, and there was just bare hate on there for Drake, but I think Drake's done a lot of things, backstabbing things behind people's backs, like historically, and just I think everyone's just got fed up of it and just like ganged together like the Avengers and went after Thanos basically. Because Drake's massive. Like you got to give him his.
He's like a conglomerate all on his own.
No, trust me. He's like every summer for since about 2010. Man's been dropping bangers. He's just getting bigger and bigger, and so. It's all, and obviously in hip hop world right now, the best is supposed to be Kendrick and Drake, and so the best always clash at the top. Like you see Jay-Z, Nas, they had their beef. Everyone has a beef at the top, and so it just all came together, man. And to be fair, it was decent. It was decent. I prefer. There's been better beefs. People saying that best beefs ever, but compared to like Nas, Jay-Z, Jadakiss, Beanie Siegel, this is just lightweight for me, basically. But
So Mr. Blake, I'm assuming obviously you heard this as well. I'm just going to assume that it is. Who won?
Kendrick, man. Kendrick. But you know what I was gonna say? I just wish that J. Cole had stayed in the mix, because I just think the way how he came in and then just dropped out. He was like, there was an anticipation, and it just went like that. And I mean, and I think that would have kept the beef juicy. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So Jay Cole's friends with both of them, though. So it'd be interesting.
In the middle. Yeah. So me and Mike, I wanted to ask you a question on this. So this is Drake v P Diddy beef. So I've heard a lot of people. Well, I've not heard the people direct, but the rumors I've heard is that Drake is seen a bit as a culture vulture. Yeah. And I don't know. I've always had this view in life that it's hard to appeal to the masses unless you kind of have to sell something of yourself. I feel like if you're authentic to yourself, you're only going to appeal to a subset. I'm not saying you can't have the off one track you drop and it's like, boom, everybody loves it. But I feel like if you're authentic to your true self, you're probably not going to do it. And the fact that, as Trife alluded to, this Don's been just dropping banger after banger after banger. So I wanted to say, do you think that there is a part of his element that does make him a vulture culture, and that's what has given him this vast success? And therefore, should we really just all be vulture cultures and just take the success?
Very good question. I think that hip hop is one of the very few institutions where being a melanated individual gives you, extra kudos. And we've seen that in order for any rapper or anybody participating in the culture, has to be exceptional. And by that, I allude to the likes of Eminem and other sort of great white rappers who have contributed to the culture, but it had to be exceptional, better than, if you like, the top 10 rappers. And I think Drake, being that he's of mixed heritage, I did not at any point, question whether he was allowed to participate in hip hop culture because, as far as I'm concerned, he appeals to the two most important demographics as far as the music is concerned. As
Yeah.
far as the blacks are concerned, they want to see a good lyricist. They want to see somebody that can do flows, that can do tunes, and that can make him dance. As far as the white consumers are concerned, they want to hear good music and they want to be able to buy it, because they are the economic powerhouse in hip hop as far as the consumer and the end user. So I honestly thought that Kendrick was reaching a little bit when he was alluding that Drake was a colonizer. Perhaps because Drake is of Canadian heritage, maybe. I thought perhaps he was trying to maybe say that, look, you're not authentically American, as in North American from the US of A, in order to be dominating the actual, this actual scene. And being that Kendrick, is the archetypal hip hop rapper in the sense that he's a black kid, of the very dark skin from Compton, the home of gangster hip hop, if you like, gangster rap from the West Coast. I think that he had the advantage by being a good rapper, but also by getting the support of hip hop aficionados. Because as much as I like Drake, I think Drake does excellent music. He's become a pop artist. He's a pop artist more than he's a hip hop artist. And I think that Drake should understand his lane, and battle rapping isn't where he belongs. He should just stick to doing great studio music, entertain us as people, and leave it right there. But he's trying to do too much, and I think to answer your question there, Doc, where the culture vulture, name or name calling actually bears some sort of fruit is when he tried to go at Meek Mill, he won. He tried to go at Pusha T. That was a very close call. I thought Pusha T's retort was actually very good, but Kendrick buried him, and I think Drake should just stay away from beefs. And if he's going to beef other rappers, he should beef rappers that are in his pretty
lane.
much his pop culture lane.
Billy and Mike, can I just go back to a point you make about obviously kind of like white people buying music and stuff like that. Last month, November, I went to 2 concerts. So I went to a Nas concert, and I've been me, Millionaire Mike together. We went to a Nines final concert, but the majority of people in both those concerts were Caucasian, much more than black people. So Caucasians are the ones buying the music, and so they're the audience now that are buying, if that makes sense. Like most people stream it and stuff like that, but in that audience on both concerts, it was 80% Caucasian.
Right.
So,
but you see that there. I think, but you see that there. I think I think that reflects a shift in the sense of I remember going Eskimo dance in like Watford or even Stratford, and them raves were gutter. There were men that looked like us in there that were on crack. But if you go to Grand Raves now, it goes back to what you're saying, Terry. It's a whole different dynamic. And I just want to touch upon Mike's point about Drake being a culture vulture. I felt he was a culture vulture when he tried to ride the UK scene. When he was doing stuff with Jetstar and BBK. Then he did the thing with Section Boys. And even most recently, the last couple of years, he did a song where he was like rapping in a UK flow.
UK,
It was terrible. Nah, man, don't do that again. Don't do that again.
But he's done that in the US as well. Like he's gone to like South and rap like the way they do in South, LA and stuff like that. So he's just feeding off.
Yeah, but it goes back to what
appreciation with that culture vulture. So
nah, man, but it goes back to what Mike was saying. He's doing too much. Just you know what you're good at. Stay in your lane. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, and I'm gonna do a little plug here. Yeah, be multifaceted, but be multifaceted in things you know you can be multifaceted in. UK floating, weren't cutting it.
Yeah, it was. I'll tell you who did smash that though. If you guys heard that bar that J. Cole does when he's like going from an American into an English accent in that rap. He did pretty good, because he doesn't go straight from one to the other. His skills to go like slowly into an English accent was like, yo, Jay, leave it, So, continuing on, in May, I'm a big football fan. I know a couple of you guys are as well. And a lot happened in May in the football scene. So in Germany, Bayer Leverkusen were the first German team to not lose a game in their league pursuit. And Man City did something that really annoyed me. They were the first team to win 4 consecutive league titles. I wanted to really to segue onto Man City because I feel it's like Man City is like the secret that everybody knows. It's like everybody knows that they did the thing.
Yeah.
Like they did the thing. But how are they still allowed to be doing what they're doing with all these titles where other teams got slapped instantly, boom, and had to accommodate? And it kind of leans me to the side that, again, like people will say it's not, but it's true. Money talks. These guys have got some paper that folds.
Yeah.
So, I'm gonna drop this too. I'm gonna drop this to me and Mike. So the question I'm gonna put out there is, I'm not sure how big into football you are, but is it all about money basically? Is it what if you got the paper, you can do what you want?
100%. But I want to address the first point. I want to big up Bayer Leverkusen because I'm an Arsenal fan and I respect the thing they did. I really do, because what they achieved is remarkable and it's probably never to be repeated again. So what Xabi Alonso did over there was absolutely amazing. And Granit Xhaka, an ex-Arsenal fan, was part of, ex-Arsenal player and current fan, was part of that team. So big up Bayer Leverkusen. Now, in regards to Manchester City, I feel that just aggrieved as any other Premier League fan. I mean, there's an element of bitterness, perhaps, or bias. Some may argue because I'm an Arsenal fan, and we were deserving a league title at least a couple of times over the last seasons. And had those allegations, which we all knew were there, very much, we were all aware that those allegations were there for a very, very long time. Had the FA taken the stance of, making a stand for justice and making a stand for, respect, the so-called armband of respect in football should not just necessarily be about racism. It should also be about how the game is conducted on the pitch and off the pitch. And that includes the administrative element of the game, where teams should be sanctioned for misappropriating funds, or in this instance, having access to a sovereign fund, which basically is a country's money that flows into the billions, that can allow them to purchase the best players in the world and the best managers in the world. Unless you're an absolute novice and crap at what you do, Doc, it's evident that they were going to win titles. So to some degree, I much prefer the United treble, because the United treble, for me, was forged in history and culture of a club that nurtured talent, and of a visionary in Sir Alex Ferguson, who was able to put together and assemble a team of champions. What Pep Guardiola achieved, yes, kudos to you, but you had a lot of help. A lot of help.
Yeah.
Crazy.
But you know what? You say that, but you know what? Now I feel like the cracks are starting to show. Like the other day, they lost to Liverpool. He's walking to the hotel.
Did you see that
He's
video?
there trying to scoff Liverpool fans.
He knows something's going on. He knows something about that.
Yes. And
Yeah.
He
I
knows
clocked that.
Have that feeling.
Yeah, and I clocked that when certain people in their higher ups are going, like the likes of Jason Wilcox, leaving to go to Man United. I was just like, what's going on there? So, there's, as you lot have said, there's clearly something going on, and all will be revealed in due course, I guess.
Yeah.
So also in May, a few other things happened. So we're coming back to our lad P Diddy. P Diddy, his video got leaked of him not behaving himself in hotels. Let's put it politely. And it's a bit strange because it's funny. I'm sure this video was about for a long time, and it's funny that maybe as noise started to die down, boom, there's a fresh video out of him doing stuff. So I wanted to say to Mr. Blake, do you think the timing is sus at all, or is it just
Of course. It's all, look, like when we all know when there's certain things going on in the world, certain distractions get put out to play, and this was just another example of that. Simple. Anything they can do to discredit him, they will do it. As long as it keeps the masses distracted, discredits him, they're on to a winner. So I wasn't surprised. Because it kind of felt like it was starting to wane a little bit. And it was like, we got to bring you back in.
Yeah. Yo, you lot focus.
Yes.
Okay.
Good.
Yeah.
And we've seen that time after time.
Time and time. So another interesting thing, in May of this year, Apple Music said the best album ever was the Miseducation of Lauryn Hill. I don't know if any of you don't remember that album.
Of course.
Yeah. That
What
was
do you
bad.
guys think?
Quality
Um,
album.
Brilliant album, but
Yeah.
I wouldn't. I'll put it in the top 10. Definitely
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
not number one, man. There's been like going back to the 70s, 80s, definitely about 9 or 10 albums ahead of that one. But it's brilliant. And I just think when they do these lists, they're very biased with what's kind of recent, like in the last 20 years and stuff like that. They tend to forget kind of like the old like masterpieces, because you got to remember majority of music now is it's a cover from someone did something with the same song like 50 years ago or something like that. Like majority, I'll say 95% of the music nowadays is a cover. So you got to give props to the music from before. But again, the original artist, definitely.
I agree with what Trev is saying. Now, I may again miss some bias, but to me, the best album of all time is the Thriller album by Michael Jackson. I'll put that on number one. Number two is probably be Bob Marley's Exodus album. The album is disgusting.
Yeah.
You know, so you've got several, as Trev said, pioneers. I mean, different genres of music that changed the face of music, that changed the face of popular culture.
Yeah.
Now, you tell me what artists of today he's inspired by Lauryn Hill. Now, I'm not saying that she's not good, because the album is sick. As Trav said, it's a bad boy album. But I can tell you so many artists that grew, that were born because those albums were made. You know, Michael Jackson alone influenced hip hop, influenced rock music, influenced pop culture. Bob Marley influences dancehall artists to this day. Vybz Kartel, Madonna loves Bob Marley. You know, the whole of Jamaica loves Bob Marley, but the whole of the world loves Bob Marley. You know, I respect Lauryn Hill wholeheartedly, because she was blackballed after the album dropped. You know, we didn't really hear much of her since, and it's a brilliant album. It's a wonderful album, particularly for the culture, but also for empowering women. You know, of all colours. Although Lauryn Hill may well say that this album was made for black people in mind. You know, because she's very Afrocentric. And I think sonically, it's a great album, but it's certainly, in my honest opinion, not the best album ever made.
Yeah. And she ain't helped herself over the years when she's had the concerts and just getting there 2, 3, 4 hours late, and then you're thinking, wow, you're trying to cement a legacy and you're moving like this.
They're moving like this, Spoiling you, and it's unfortunate those things will sit longer in the memory than how the album was. Because your devout fans are going to the concerts. So it's those people you have to amass to. So in May, moving on, Rishi Sunak finally said it's clear that we're perishing and we need to call a general election. And equally, Trump was found guilty of 34 felony counts. So politics seems to be moving a bit mad. So in this country, I'm going to ask Millionaire Mike, why did Richie just decide now's the time? Like, he could have waited to the end. Why did he decide now, look, let's just sack it in and let's do a general election? Because as far as I'm concerned, he must have known.
I think I may be slightly controversial, but I'm only repeating conversations that I've had away from the pod, you know, in every day along the streets, you know, on my way to work, on my way from work, and talking to general people. And I think that the general population of the UK, you know, the 97% of British white people were slightly concerned that a man of Asian extraction was the leader of the country. I don't think he particularly went down well, despite being in 2024. We still have a lot of work to do in this country. And I feel that he wasn't, you know, democratically elected. If you recall, he was only installed as a result of a resignation. And that resignation, was it Liz Truss, if I'm not mistaken? So when Liz Truss resigned, then here we have Mr. Rishi Sunak, who doesn't sound remotely English, who sounds very, very much Asian, and he's a proud Asian for that matter, and big up the Asian massive. But there's still a lot of work to do in this country. And despite his brilliance and despite his intellect, the fact that his name was Rishi Sunak was an issue. And that's basically why, and even he realized very quickly that, as much as I'm trying my very best here, I need to call a general election so that if I want to continue doing, serving my term as Prime Minister, I have the full support and I can galvanize the support that I need to get my policies forward. And we saw from the results that the country didn't want anything to do with him.
Yeah. Also, he wasn't really in touch with the general people. Like, if you go back to his interview about
He said some stuff.
how were you struggling? How were you struggling when you were a kid? And he said you didn't have Sky TV.
Yeah.
Sky TV. I bet he still had ZTV though.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it showed my man was way out of touch with people. So yeah, it was written from early from him. So yeah, interesting story. So Mr. Blake, Trump's 34 felony counts still didn't affect man's bulletproof.
No. Teflon
Teflon done.
Yeah, but again, it goes back to what the guys have been saying, innit? In the sense of it's either you like him or you don't like him. And there is considerably a big amount of Americans that rate Trump. I would even go as far as saying that there's even a lot of Black Americans that like Trump.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? And now we see his board, and there's no one like us on there. Granted, I know a lot of Black African Americans voted because they felt like voting Trump in was a way of helping them economically in terms from a tax perspective. But sometimes it can't just be on that why you vote somebody in. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I think a lot of people are gonna find that out the hard way.
Yeah.
Gonna feel.
Because
So
in June, all must feel.
On the tax level that he's going to help, if that makes sense. So it's like, I think he's going to help like the top super rich people, so like top boys and stuff like that. The people that are just earning like 120 grand, nah, he don't care about you really. One of them ones. They're going to find out soon.
Yeah. So in June, a few bits happened as well. So Nvidia just keeps on rising. So they first went big in January, but in June